I'm making this video today to talk about the EOS voting process as well as provide some context as to what's been going on. I've been monitoring the launch process pretty closely, and I think there's a lot that's easy to not understand, so I wanted to talk through some of that. This is a site that has been providing the status of the launch only at a high level. Unfortunately, we've seen this checkbox for days, and we've been waiting and waiting and waiting for this launch. And now we're in this voting process that is already in its second day. So let's talk about what's been going on really high level. This is another status page. If we go down to this diagram, this is the diagram of everything that needs to happen to launch the mainnet. Now, why is this taking so long? Why is this, is this different than other blockchains? Let's put this in a little bit of context. This is the only blockchain that has been launched by the community. Normally a blockchain is a developer, in the case of Satoshi, or potentially a team, but probably a person, who launched the network alone. They knew what they had, they knew the software, they wrote the software, they tested it internally. Nobody was paying attention, so if it did take them 2 weeks, we would never know. So it's a different scenario. Same thing with companies. Many companies are foundations or companies or organizations. They've got their internal team. That internal team knows the software inside and out. They've test launched it. They know exactly what's required. They put it up. They don't even have to put it up publicly. They can test it, with that's called dog fooding, where you use your own product. You stand it up. You have all your employees transact with it, and you get to test it that way, and then you open it up to the public. EOS is completely different. EOS was software that was written by a company called Block One and then published on GitHub. And that was it. Block One said from the beginning, we won't be part of launching this network. We'll write the software, but the community has to launch the network. Now, why is that interesting? This EOS was primarily aimed at being a decentralized system. Well, the question becomes interesting. How many things can you decentralize? Well, we decentralize the development of Bitcoin by using GitHub and source control and allowing open source software, allowing the entire community to contribute to the software. Well, never in the past that I know of have we ever launched a blockchain via the community, right? No central leader, no central company, just software and literally, in this case, thousands of people from different countries speaking different languages, coordinating across time zones to make this blockchain happen. So it is incredibly complicated. I want to make another video. This was just on my mind first. I'm going to do this one, and then I'll film the other video. The other video I want to do is just giving you an insight into what that looked like, because it was so inspiring to watch the world come together. Literally thousands of people coming together to make this launch happen. So I'll do that in the next video. But this is the diagram. Like, all this stuff had to happen. We have to launch the network. We have to test the network in a test environment. We have to test it for security and test it for functionality. And then eventually we need to make it public and test it in the public. And then we start flowing blocks based on chosen, they call them appointed block producers, APBs. And the APBs at some point resign themselves as in control of the network, because that's a centralized, right? We don't want one person or even 21 appointed block producers running anything. We want the elected block producers that are elected in a decentralized manner. So at some point, the APBs resign themselves of having that initial control to launch the network. The launch is managed by the entire community, so it isn't like the APBs can do anything that's a problem. They just have a certain level of control that we don't want long term. So they host elections. Now we're doing voting. And at some point soon, we'll have elected block producers, and this entire diagram will be complete. But, go to this website and look at this diagram. There's so much to do. But I think if you look through this, some of it will not make any sense, right? There's a lot of it that if you don't have context, technically, you don't know what it is. But just chew on this diagram a little bit and appreciate how complex this is, especially when you're trying to get consensus across the entire planet with people in different time zones and whatnot. Very, very complicated. So that's why it's taking so long. It's not a problem that it's taking this long. It's just longer than other blockchains, and I think a lot of people don't understand why. No other blockchain has ever been launched this way. Which brings us to the specific topic today of voting. This is the voting status page. Now that the EOS blockchain mainnet is now live, but you need the 21 block producers, the elected block producers, which will run the network. We need to elect those. So we're now in this phase of electing those block producers. You get 1 vote per EOS token, and so far the actual number of votes is 28 million, right? 2.8%. In order for the elected block producers, it's basically a quorum. We define a quorum as 15% of tokens being voted. And until we have 15% of the network participating in the vote, we actually don't want to run the blockchain on elected block producers based on anything less than 15%. It's kind of like if you had an election and you said, we're just going to call it at the end of the first 2 hours, and anyone who's not willing to get up early and vote doesn't count. So we want 15%, and we'll take whatever time we need to get 15%. The other thing that makes this really hard, which is another reason I'm making this video, is voting is not obvious. This isn't a ballot box. We already know how to vote, in a traditional paper election, but the tools here literally have been built very recently. Some of them just during or just previous to the launch. So not only are they fresh tools that needed to be tested and battle tested, but we need to educate people on how to use them. And that's a huge undertaking. How do you get information out this quickly? This is real time. So anyway, 15% is the goal. We currently have 2.8%. This number of actual votes is actually climbing with an increasing rate. We ended yesterday at about 1%. I woke up this morning with about 2%, and we're already at 2.8%. So it's kind of like really simply put, the Western world voted 1%, the Asian world voted 1%, and now the education is getting out there, and I think we're going to see a climb in this voter turnout in the next few days. But I just wanted to explain some of this so you understand why it's taking so long, and that's a great thing, right? While this voting process is going on, people are realizing, oh, I have to take part. A lot of people around the world, a lot of countries, the voter turnout is really low. Well, we want an engaged community. EOS wants to be run by the community. And here's an example where you don't get a network. You don't get to use the EOS network unless you vote. And people are learning that, and people are learning the tools. So let's get to the tools. I'll include a link of this tutorial in the description. This actually doesn't tell you how to do voting, but it points you at three tutorials that explain based on your level of expertise and need for security. The beginner one is probably what everyone watching this video will use. The intermediate one is doable if you understand Linux and the command line. And the expert one, I don't really think anyone needs unless you have like billions of dollars of EOS. So I'm going to include this. This will give a little context. This beginner one is actually pointing to a Reddit post. What I just found this morning is Chris Coney, who runs the Cryptoverse YouTube channel. He's done this one that's the most thorough and most easy to understand for the scatter tool, which is the primary voting tool. This is the best one I've seen. I've seen a lot of demos of scatter where nothing's really explained. When I went to try to do what's in the videos, it didn't work. Chris did a really, really beautiful job of presenting how to use scatter. The one thing he didn't do in his video is provide some context. So that's what I'm going to do in this video before I wrap up. And I want to address again contextually a couple things that you'll see in this video. First thing is the concern for security in the EOS network is really, really high. So what you'll notice in this video is you're doing a lot of things like checking that you have the right version of the software that you've probably never done before. I've never even been told to do this. I've never seen anyone suggest that I do this before. Why is this, right? Let's address why are we going through this extra trouble. This isn't because EOS is less secure. It isn't because there have been hacks. I've seen 0 reports of any hacks. But what the EOS community is being really, really careful about, and I think it's very warranted, is when you're launching a product like this that's so decentralized, the launch itself is decentralized, you don't have an authority to go to find out what's the official tool, right? If you're downloading a Google app, well, you can check, the easiest check is to make sure that the publisher, I think it's called publisher in the Play Store, is Google, or that an Apple app is made by Apple. It's easy enough to verify that they're coming from authoritative sources. We don't have that in the EOS community because it was launched in a decentralized manner. There's no one voice we can go to verify something's authenticity. So at the first level, the block producers were saying, make sure you see news from at least 5 of the top reliable block producers before you trust anything. So Scatter is a tool that's written by one of the pretty well-known block producers, and it's been blessed by numerous block producers. So we now know that that's got some authority to it, but we also know it'd be pretty easy for somebody in this early days of EOS to write another app, another Chrome plugin that looks like Scatter, but is written by somebody else. So EOS is being really, really careful to ensure that in a time when lots of scams could happen, that you know absolutely that you've got something secure. So you're going to see a lot of stuff that probably seems like overkill, and hopefully it is. Hopefully we don't need to do any of this, and there are no scammers, or at least there aren't any major ones. But rather than hope, they're just making absolutely certain that nobody has any trouble. So you're going to see verifications you don't normally see. I think it's a great thing. The other thing I wanted to address is you'll probably be struck by not understanding what you're looking at. There's a lot of things. Scatter's a great tool. It is the most beautiful tool I've seen so far to do what it does. It's kind of like a wallet, what we traditionally call a wallet, but it's got all these pieces. So as you watch this video, you're probably going to ask, well, what the hell is this? What the hell is that? It has key pairs, networks, and identities. Just very high level, I'm not going to go into detail, but just high level, key pairs are, as you've seen in my other tutorials and my newsletter, key pairs are wallets. Wallets don't hold money, so wallets is a terrible name. Key pairs is just actually a much better name for a wallet. When you enter your key pair, you're entering your private key, which Scatter stores locally on your machine and keeps it encrypted. So it's very much like a desktop software wallet. But we call it key pairs, and I think that's kind of cool because that doesn't confuse the person with improper words. It's actually a key pair. That's what we should be calling wallets. So that's what your key pair is. That's effectively your wallet. Networks, as far as I understand them in Scatter, are like trusted websites. These are, here's the list of blockchains that I deal with. And every time you add one, Scatter will ask you, do you mean to add this one? And that's a great level of security because if you go to a website that's not reputable, or you connect to the wrong blockchain, or, I don't know, there's a bunch of ways this can happen. Scatter will verify with you, do you intend to connect to this network? And once you click yes, that'll be added to your list of networks. So you'll see Chris do that. It's a great, again, an uncommon feature, but it's an extra level of security that's worth knowing about, and that's a little bit of context about it. The last one is identity. And this one I understand the least, but I have a rough idea and wanted to share that with you. Identity is related to your key pair, so you'll see that you'll tie your key pair in with it. But the EOS network also has identities, usernames. So the usernames they keep being likened to email generally. We're used to key pairs where we have this ugly address that's just a bunch of letters and numbers. And so if we want someone to send us money in a cryptocurrency world, we give them that address. It's nothing you can ever memorize. It's just this terrible, ugly name that is useless. You have to look it up, you have to copy paste it and send it to somebody, or use a QR code. EOS has a system of having names that are kind of like emails, where you can select a name that you can remember, and somebody can send money directly to that name, and EOS will map that name to the public address. Really, really cool feature. It's actually been around in most of Dan Larimer's projects, I think right from the beginning in BitShares. So that's what identities are in Scatter. You're going to use the key pair to query the EOS network and find the username that's associated with your key pair, which initially will be yet another ugly name. You can change that, and we'll get to that in a future video. But at the moment, it's randomly assigned. So it's another ugly name, but it's a placeholder name until you get a nice name. So those are the three main things you're going to see done in the video. The rest of it is, he talks about pairing. We're used to Bluetooth pairing. A Bluetooth headset will pair with your phone. You'll add the network for EOS, and then you'll pair Scatter with that network so that they can talk to each other. And then once all that's set up, it gets very easy to use the EOS network and other networks. But I just wanted to run you through the basics of what you'll see, because I don't see anyone providing context. And I think without that understanding, this is just a crazy, confusing, everything is new kind of world. And that's terrible. It's a terrible experience. And I'll say again, something I say all the time when I do talks and whatnot. We're early in this technology. Scatter is by far the best thing I've seen out there so far. And these tools will get better. This stuff will make more sense. Just like email, we don't even think about email now because the tools are so good. The addresses make sense. We get to choose our addresses. All that stuff will start to be easy eventually in blockchain. Scatter and EOS, I think, are the best examples so far. They're the best tools so far. But we will have better and better tools as time goes on. I hope this video was really valuable. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section below. Thanks for watching.